recording is going to. Hello, everybody. This is Will Harold, the Energy Hunter with Akashic Intelligence, the original AI, with our Secret of Light study group. I guess I should say discussion group. We've moved away from the Secret of Light for a little while because we actually want to set the stage for maybe where Walter Russell was in his thinking and philosophy when he actually began to develop his concepts and actually had his awakening and enlightening that he talks about, where he was influenced by spirit to write the Divine Iliad and his other concepts. And we are actually going to be looking at Blavatsky's The Secret Doctrine, which was actually looked at by Manly P. Hall and kind of congealed into a more consumable description of what Blavatsky was talking about. So we're going to take some questions that Manly P. Hall had written up on the Secret Doctrine and discuss those in light of the topic of this discussion today, which is spiritual sovereignty. This is the third in the series. We already had two out there. But this one is spiritual sovereignty. The first one was spiritual sovereignty, where to begin. The second one was spiritual sovereignty, an occult perspective. And this one is spiritual sovereignty, who are the rulers of the race? And this is directly from Blavatsky's The Secret Doctrine. So I want to share a couple of quotes first, and these are both by Chinese philosophers. And they're both basically they were contemporary, supposedly, around 6th century BC. The first one is from Lao Tzu, who wrote the I Ching, and it is, if you want to be a great leader, you must learn to follow the Tao. And the Tao is also known as the Way. Stop trying to control. Let go of fixed plans and concepts, and the world will govern itself. And the second one is from Confucius, who says, signs and symbols rule the world, not words nor laws. So again, these are both from Chinese philosophers. And the first is, like I said, when you talk about the Tao, it's called the Way. And early Christianity was also called the Way, followers of the Way. Some have actually, stretched to say that they were actually talking about Taoism, that Jesus had studied Taoism, and that was also the Way. Again, I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there as that's what is said. Any thoughts or discussion on, in order to be a leader, you have to let go of fixed plans and stop trying to control? And has anyone ever done that and had it actually work out for them?
Yeah, I had some success when I was forced to become a supervisor of a handful of folks in the library. And each person that hired in turn had a completely different style of doing that job. And the guy who was following a very aggressive woman, he said, well, if I accept this, it's not going to be the same at all. I said, that's going to be fine. And he did a really good job. It worked out well. The students who they supervised responded to each of them in different ways, and it worked out well for the library.
Anybody else?
I've had great managers where, well, I was in IT, and he basically let us do how we want to work. We worked from home, we worked at the office. This was the beginning of web development when the internet came up at the office. And his management, though, weren't really happy. He had fight with them, but we did what we were supposed to. We delivered, even more than necessary. You know what I mean? People worked more hours. We took walks outside when we felt like it. So yeah, that control part, I've worked for controlling people, and anyway, I wouldn't call them great leaders for sure.
Yeah, I had to fight to keep my managers at bay on behalf of my staff.
So would you say that some of this, though, has to do with how much the people that are being led have the ability to self-govern and to actually not look to management to solve their problems?
Mhm.
And that's definitely true, because I ended up with a couple of other folks that they just said, tell me what to do and I'll do it. And if I didn't tell them something every day, they didn't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
So, it works both ways.
Mm-hmm. And I think, as we look at Chinese philosophers, we can also look at the country of China and maybe say, where did that country go and where is it today? Because these philosophies were done in the 8th century, and a lot of the Chinese government today has become totally totalitarianism, right? Totally opposite from what was being said here. But they may have a lot of signs and symbols. So it's kind of like, which way did they go? Did they go the way of the Tao or the way of Confucius, right? Confucius doesn't say, let go. He's just stating what does rule the world. So the reason I brought this up was because the question is, who are the rulers of the race? Confucius isn't really saying there are any rulers. He's just saying that signs and symbols, but someone's making the signs and symbols. But, is it kind of a group conscious, what they would call a zeitgeist, that's controlling those, signs and symbols? And even Lao Tzu is not saying that there aren't people that are leading. He's just giving the definition of a good leader. So I just wanted to bring these up to give a couple of different, any more comments before we move on?
Have you guys heard of Simon Sinek? It's his whole premise is like leaders should eat last. Leaders eat last is the name of one of his books, and he's the main philosophy is like, if you can empower the workforce from within, then they're self-managed, and kind of like what Lao Tzu says about the Tao. But
well, that's not what he's saying, though, is it? Maybe I'm confused.
Well, he's saying to let go of fixed plans, and the world will govern itself. So I would say that yes, he's saying in a sense that people will govern themselves also. If we
He's in a different world. I don't think he's. I really think he would think different if he was alive today.
Yeah. Well,
I'm not kidding either. I really believe that.
Well, and again, him being Chinese, he may. I mean, there is, the way the Chinese have become is totalitarianism, right?
Yep.
And that's not really working for him either. Or maybe it is, but it's not working for the people. And it's kind of funny. Go ahead.
I'm going to say China has definitely been ruled by a whole variety of very strong leaders. And I think Lao Tzu was probably also taking a jab at them and saying, hey, like this big strong-armed leader stuff isn't actually the way to make a prosperous country. And my other thought is there's a bit of this like left brain desire to control. And I think it's a bit of this idea that if you try to look too far in the future and put constraints on people and control them, I mean, if you read the Tao, there's a lot of stuff about the more rules and regulations, the more crazy things happen, which is, so it's a lot of this left brain like desire to control is what I see that comment as hinting at.
And again, I just kind of want you to keep these two ideas in the back of your mind as we move forward and begin to discuss the Secret Doctrine and some of the other concepts that we're going to bring forward here. And again, I think that, this was 8th century BC that these were written. So quite a bit of time, before, I would even say, some of the, maybe even Egypt, not much before Egypt, but,
I want to just
at
Oh,
the beginning. Go ahead, Jeremy.
Wanted to just inject one more perspective. You know, a lot of the topics of management resonate with me. That's my job, but also my other job as a parent is this is all very relevant in trying to get the kids through the day, and authority and control just always ends up terrible, you know, as an approach. And sometimes I find myself doing it. And you know, I'm like, why do I fall back to this, you know, this approach that I know never works and makes us all feel awful. But then we're also bringing it back to Steiner, and Waldorf, one of the kind of key approaches that is taken there is through repetition and ritual and finding, you know, and song and kind of connecting to what I think are just different representations of some of the, we were talking about the natural law stuff, vibration and rhythm and things like that. So I think that there is some in the Waldorf and Steiner approach of trying to tap into some of those fundamentals and to get away from the, there's my guy, get away from the kind of the man's authoritarian impulses.
And so, like I said, then this is great. This is what I want to have, you know, in our minds as we move forward, because we're going to get into some information which is going to paint a picture of how the spiritual landscape can change throughout history. But again, I believe it does repeat itself. But what we're going to discuss a little bit, since we are going to discuss the secret doctrine, I really want to paint that picture of what Blavatsky was coming into in the 1888 when she actually wrote the Secret Doctrine, and what the environment and the feeling of the time was when she wrote that. So let's go ahead and look at some of our questions for what we're going to study or discuss today. So the first question is, how does Theosophy and spiritualism relate to each other? Now, Theosophy is what Blavatsky founded, and spiritualism was actually, when you look it up, was started by our old friend Emanuel Swedenborg. So let's go ahead and look a little bit at that. So the spiritualist movement. If you guys remember Emanuel Swedenborg, here's Emanuel. Call him Manny for friendship. He is a very amazing guy. He was the first guy to really take the Bible and begin to meditate and begin to actually go into what we'd call the higher realms of heaven. And he was an engineer and also in government, and he was very well respected, but he wrote dissertations on the Bible and what he saw in these different realms. And he also was the kind of the father of psychology, modern psychology. Jung gives him credit for the ideas of the archetypes that Jung took later. He also was the one who actually identified the limbic system in the body. And so he did a lot of work with the body, with meditation, with new concepts of the spirit that was from a Christian perspective, but was a mystic Christianity. And his view of Christ and his view of things were much different than was being taught by the church. He didn't really believe that Christ was a God or a savior or anything like that. So he was beginning to actually kind of challenge the ideas of the Western Christianity, and also saying that he could actually go into these higher realms, just as Ezekiel and Isaiah and some of the other prophets of the Old Testament had done, and speak with spirits in these other realms and actually on other planets, for what he said. So very interesting guy, but he, like I said, is seen as the father of the spiritualist movement, because he began to move away from just doctrinal theses within Western Christianity and religion, and began to actually expand on the spirit world, expand on the higher planes of existence. And then the next guy, again, within the spiritual movement, friend of ours from far back, is Franz Mesmer. As you remember, we talked about Mesmer and mesmerism and hypnosis and what he called magnetic fluid. But he again began to deal with energies and a spiritism that was outside of us, that wasn't really about gods and demons. It was more about this energy and this life that was in the different planes of existence. And it was a different way of really experiencing spirit. So, you know, as this was coming on, as all these new concepts of spirituality and the spiritism movement began to grow, the first thing that happens is we have the American Revolution. That's in 1775 to 1783. So as these new concepts come on, we also see that it's influencing the population of the United States, because this is where Mesmer is doing a lot of his work. And we're seeing a new idea of freedom take place. We're seeing a new concept of what is freedom. And this whole thing may have actually influenced the founding fathers in what they were thinking about when they wrote the Bill of Rights, which, you know, says that these are God-given rights. You know, they were given by no man. And so our idea of spirit and of where we stand in the world is beginning to change as the American Revolution takes place.
Didn't some of this stuff supposed to happen much earlier? Even like Columbus knew about it and they planned the United States to be this great place?
Could be, you know, I don't really know. All I can say is that, you
I think I
know,
read that from Manley.
yeah, I mean, it could have been, and again, there are like concepts that the United States has been around for a long time, that Europe knew about it. But again, this is more about the American Revolution and breaking away from King George, who was very authoritarian, wanted a lot of taxes, and what really, you know, inspired them to do that? What really inspired the entire nation to look at breaking away from the old norms of the security of, you know, and not all of the Americans wanted to break away. Some wanted to stay with the king. And so, you know, I'm just kind of saying that this was a major war, you know, in the history of the United States, and it kind of begins to shape up as these things are occurring within the spiritual movements of the United States. The other thing that happened around this time was the Rosetta Stone was found in Egypt by Napoleon's troops. A general, I think, or a captain in his army actually uncovered the Rosetta Stone in Egypt at this time. So that was going to begin to lead to new spiritualism, also spiritualism, the ideas of Egypt that were going to come out of that. So we were beginning to have this new enlightenment almost as to another type of spirituality, another type of occultism that has not been around in the Western world, at least. And when I'm saying Western, I'm saying, you know, basically from Greece to the Americas, ever. You know, it had been Christian based since about, you know, I would say most of it got lost around 500 AD, 600 AD, when they started getting rid of the temples and everything, where some of the Romans, and then we brought in the Vatican. But the discussions of this type of connection with spirit or source hadn't been talked about for a long, long time. And so now it's being brought back. And then what happens after the American Revolution, you know, we got about 70 years, and then we begin to have, well, before this is that we actually have the dinosaur. The first dinosaur bones were actually identified. They'd been found about 50 years earlier, but they thought they were actually human remains. It wasn't until 1824 that the first dinosaur bone was actually identified as a different thing that we had never discussed before in human history. That there was a whole species of animals that lived before man that is not covered in the Bible. So this began to bring up ideas that maybe the Bible, maybe the things that we were being taught weren't true. Because how could this book that covered everything miss out this whole area within the 7 days of creation? So we actually have these physical artifacts that have no explanation in the Bible, in Christian text. So I'm just throwing it out there because it is affecting the psyche, the spiritual psyche of the mind of the Western culture. So any comments on what I've talked to date at this time before I get into Allan Kardec?
A question. It was 1824, you said, that they identified the dinosaur bones?
Correct.
Wow.
They were actually discovered in the, I believe in the late 1700s, but they didn't know what they were, and it was actually identified and like documented in 1824.
So the Smithsonian at that point wasn't strong enough to take them and hide them somewhere.
No. There's too many. There's too many of them being found. I think is the problem also.
Yeah.
Or maybe they're not real. We made them all up. Possible.
I don't know, I've also heard some really interesting conspiracies around dinosaur bones and stuff too. So, but we don't have to get into that.
And again, I'm quoting what what is pretty much common knowledge or whatever.
For sure.
And again, this is why I still believe what Steiner says is that to really know knowledge, you have to intuit it. You have to go to the Akashic record and find it, because if we rely on secondhand knowledge all the time, who knows, right? But
True.
I think we are going to paint a picture here a bit, because we do know. I mean, we do know that some of these things actually happened. I mean, I have relatives that I had talked to that knew about the Civil War, knew about Abraham Lincoln and things like that. They're all gone now, but when I was a child, I knew I had relatives that did. Okay, so the next thing that happens is that we have this thing called the spiritualist movement, where there becomes a very big interest because they have this thing called the turning tables that they're performing on stage, where they're speaking to ghosts and they're having seances, and there's this huge revival in the spirits and the dead and communing with spirits. I mean, this is a movement that actually goes into Europe, into the United States. It's a huge movement of people that are really getting into seances and mediums and crystal balls and talking to the dead. Something that's never really happened before. One, because the church really had, put it down and not encouraged it. But now this was becoming more and more open because it was becoming entertainment also. Some of it was kind of taken as trickery, or it wasn't done, but then there was other examples of it. And again, later on in the 1900s, even Jung's theses for his doctorate will be from his cousin, who is a medium, in which he actually does his thesis on these same type of events. So it's even going to influence Carl Jung later. And so Allan Kardec was one of the main people who actually promoted this. And his idea was almost a Steiner-esque, where he tried to actually look at this spiritual movement, spiritualist movement, as spiritual science. He wanted to take it and look at it from an empirical idea. And what he did was he went around and interviewed all the different mediums and would ask them the same question. And his scientific approach was, if they all answered in the same way, not knowing what the question was going to be, would that then somewhat prove his theses that this was a real thing? And that what came out was he did ask different people the same question and came out with approximately the same answers through different modes. Some of it was what they call automatic writing. Some of it was just kind of channeling and other things. But he kind of did have a empirical evidence that this was real. So this is the movement that's kind of going on at this time, is that we're having this big spiritualist revival, that people are beginning to speak to spirits, they're beginning to understand the spiritual world. It's just not heaven. It's just not you die and go to heaven, that you actually can have discussions with people in different realms. And the world is kind of waking up to this new idea of what the earth is, what the spirit realm is, and that there are different planes of existence. So this is what's going on in about the 1850s. Now, at the same time, Blavatsky is supposedly in Tibet. And the reason that she's going to Tibet is that she is going to have conversations with what we call the Mahatmas and the enlightened ones, and they're going to talk to her and teach her and train her in the esoteric knowledge of the secret schools. And this occult knowledge, the secret knowledge from the Mahatmas, is supposedly being passed down from the Lemurian times, from the foundation of the earth. And this is really the basis for all religious doctrine in what Blavatsky is saying. And if you read The Secret Doctrine, we talked, a lot of the concepts that come from these Mahatmas, from what they were teaching within these occult practices, are the basis for many of the religious studies of the world, and probably serve as the basis for all religion. So here's a picture we have over here. Can you see this picture here? And here's Madame Blavatsky here, and then here are the three Mahatmas that she supposedly spoke with and was trained by. So that's why, and when you read Manly P. Hall, he actually goes into great detail. It's almost like he's trying to prove that what she said was true, because there's a lot of discussion on whether or not what Blavatsky is talking about has any validity. And he goes into great detail of why it does have validity. Because if it doesn't have validity, then everything we're discussing is moot. So that's why I kind of want to set the stage, because I want to talk about what's going on at the time, where the psychology and the spirituality of the people, especially of the West, is going, and how are we getting, and where do we go from as we pick up the secret doctrine. So as Blavatsky's in Tibet, the other thing that's happening is that Darwin publishes The Origin of the Species, which was the book where it said that we basically, it didn't really say it, but that's what is being said, is that we came from apes. Right? So this is now another, chop at the root of the Bible, of Christianity, of old doctrine, of old ways, right? Because if we're from apes and we have and it's all survival of the fittest, then where does the Bible play in, right? So first of all, we have this, the dinosaurs being found, and now we have Darwin published his Origin of the Species, which is another chop at the root of the Western religion and philosophy of God and creationism. So people are beginning to lose, kind of that touch and that grasp with their Christian roots, and they're looking for new spiritual ideas. They still want to be spiritual, but they're beginning to see that there is different realms out there, and so they're beginning to move into the spiritualist movement. And actually, Allan Kardec wrote some books on what he called Spiritism, which is not the spiritualist movement of Swedenborg and Mesmer, but it is based on spirits and communing with spirits. And there are some churches, there's one in San Francisco still, a Spiritist church, that practices what Allan Kardec wrote. So to show how influential this movement was, when Abraham Lincoln's son Willie died in 1862, his wife Mary Todd actually began to consult with spiritists to talk to their dead son. And this became very well known and was very well published, that the president's wife and even Abraham Lincoln was sitting with mediums to try to commune with their dead son. Now, this had never been done before. I mean, this is something where as a president that you're actually going to spiritual mediums to explore another world and commune with your dead child. So this is how pervasive this movement was within the American culture. Any comments or questions so far about what I've talked about?
Well, just a bad joke. That would kind of be like Biden joining the New Age movement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would be becoming part of what is going on in society at the time, and actually stepping out and almost validating what's going on, right? Validating that this is an experience that's real. So what's funny then, with this and with this movement, now we have this spiritist movement moving on now. We had the spiritualist movement, and then the Revolutionary War. Then we had the spiritist movement come on, and now we have the American Civil War. Right? Is next. And so we have these upheavals, it would appear, that come with these spiritual movements as they begin to flourish, and maybe people begin to grasp and get ideas that may differ and cause this, I would say, I wouldn't say confusion. I would just say that differing ideas about how to look at the world and how to look at their world. And so we have the American Civil War, and here's the flag of the Confederate Army here. Oh, shoot. And this flag is called the rebel flag. I think some people know it. It's become a very hateful symbol now, but this is the original flag, and it was actually square. And this cross was actually called the Cross of Matthew, who was the first disciple of the Bible. So this cross was supposed to be the cross of Matthew, and the red was supposed to be Christ's blood, supposedly. So this has very Christian roots to its symbolism. And so I'd like, just remember back to what Confucius said, right? Which was,
Right.
Signs and symbols rule the world, not words nor laws. So let's look at the symbolism of this, and this was a symbolism of its time when it came out. This was supposedly the cross of Matthew. This was the blood of Christ. And now, how has this symbol become a symbol of hate? So we see that these symbols that may, again, I don't know if the history is true. This is just what my research showed. But they do morph over time. At one time, this rebel flag was also kind of taken up as a symbol of American tenacity to not conform. And this was used as that symbol quite a bit. But today it's morphed. But again, from what they say, a Christian-based symbol for the time that was being had. So we can still see that the ideas of Christianity, the blood of Christ, the cross of Andrew is still there to inspire people to move forward with ideals. So after the American Civil War, the Union wins. Lincoln's assassinated, which he was warned about by a mystic, by a clairvoyant, that it was going to happen, didn't take their heeding. But the world begins to change. And
he
so,
won? How do you know somebody won?
Well, the only reason I'd say somebody won is because the Union that Jefferson Davis was not made president, Lincoln was. So
no, I meant against the king.
Yeah. So
you're talking about something else. Yes.
Okay. And again, I think that's going to be a good question when we're going to have with World War II. Okay. So after that, Blavatsky returns from Tibet. Okay. And she starts the Theosophical Society with Colonel Alcott. And this is in 1875. And then in 1888, the Secret Doctrine is written and introduced. So 13 years from the founding of the Theosophical Society, we write the Secret Doctrine and it's published. Now what happens after that is that the Book of the Dead from Egypt is also published, is translated. And so we have another new esoteric, occult concepts coming into the world. So from the time of Swedenborg to the finding of the Rosetta Stone, which is 1800, 100 years, 95 years later, we actually get the translation of the Book of the Dead. So who knows what went on between 1880 and 1895 and who had knowledge of what the Egyptian writings were, but we got it to the public in 1895.
Wasn't there Masons involved here, Freemasonry and this stuff?
Well, again, Steiner was a big Mason guy, and I don't really put like, I don't believe all Masons are the same, so.
I don't mean that bad. Yeah, I didn't mean negative.
Yeah, well, again, the Masons are a group. I mean, again, were they part of the American Revolution? Supposedly, right?
Right.
Supposedly, every president we've had was a Mason. Supposedly that the discussions for the Revolutionary War were held in Masonic halls. So, they may have, again, they were a secret society that was dealing with the occult and the hidden knowledge. So yes, they were an occult society that had quite a bit of esoteric knowledge and esoteric ritual within the West.
From Manly, it seems like they had everything. I mean, they were doing it for good stuff. It seems like the way he says it, anyway.
Well, again, good and evil are difficult concepts because we don't understand God's purposes.
Hmm.
And so for me, it's difficult to say what is good and what is evil.
Sure.
The idea is that the secret societies did not want this information to become public because unless you were initiated in it, what you would do with it was unpredictable and could be detrimental to yourself and to others because it is very powerful information, supposedly, right?
No, they tested you, I think, right? And they gave you some kind of test.
Well, they tested you and they actually made sure that you were qualified before you came in. It's very much, and that didn't mean that people didn't go the other way, that people did not move on to a different ideas and use them for their own means. Because if you even look at down here, so this is the symbol, again, symbolism we're talking about. This is the symbol that came out when the Theosophical Society first came out, all right? This is their symbol, and this little saying down here basically says that the basis of religious is truth, the ultimate religion is truth. But within this symbol, you can see that here, this is the Star of David, basically, which is also the Hermetic idea of as above, so below. It also has the symbolism of the Ankh, which is basically the key to the afterlife. It also up here has the Sanskrit word for Om up here. And then it also has the swastika. But it's different than the Nazi swastika.
Different way, right?
It's turned the other way.
Yeah.
Which, if you look at the way it would spin, this would be a right spinning swastika, which is within biogeometry is a positive spin.
Wouldn't it go the other way? Wouldn't it spin?
No, it would spin. It would spin towards the L, so it's going to spin this way, not towards this side. But it would catch. This way it's kind of breaking the wind.
I trust you.
And so this one would have a left spinning movement. Okay.
Yes.
Which would be detrimental within biogeometry's definitions. So as you can, but and then you have the Aurora Boreas here, which is a snake, eating its tail. And then
Oh,
the
wait a minute. So the sign here is good, is what you're saying?
yeah, within the
Okay.
within the anthroposophical, it's a positive spin.
Got you.
And so there's a lot of symbology here that's happening. And what's amazing is that two of these symbols will show up again in the Second World War. This will be the swastika that is transposed and used for the German army. And this is the Star of David, which will be placed on all the Jews. So within this symbol alone, there are two symbols that will be transposed and used later on. Even though the Star of David was never really associated with the Jews, but Hitler did take it and use that as their symbol. So we have the Book of the Dead being published, right? Which is, again, this new energy, this new spirituality coming out of Egypt, new ideas about where we go, the afterlife, so on and so forth. But another amazing factor that happens after the Secret Doctrine is written, and I have it above here, just I didn't have room, was in 1898, the Ouija board is patented and put out by Parker Brothers as a board game that everybody was going to use. And this is really an amazing fact, right? Because what we have, again, is that question on secret societies, should the information be published, right? And within 10 years of the Secret Doctrine being published, we now have a patented game for every home in America and the world that actually invokes spiritism without ever having any indoctrination or teaching on how to use it and what it really does. So this kind of shows that maybe there was a good reason for not sharing esoteric or occult knowledge in public. Because what's amazing is that with the Ouija board and the Parker Brothers patent, is in the patent it says this book can speak to the dead. I mean, this game can speak to the dead, have intuition, have clairvoyant knowledge. And it says in the patent that this was tested by the patent office to be true. That's why they allowed that wording in the patent.
Wow.
So again, we see that within, like I said, 10 years of the publishing of the Secret Doctrine, we now have everybody in the US practicing occult practices without having any internship or initiation into what they're actually doing.
I have a quick question to interject. Do you think that was by, you're kind of implying that, you know, this was an accident and it happened and, you know, it got away from them, so to speak. Do you really think, I kind of want to ask the group, like, do you guys think it was an accident or it was intentional? I'd kind of lie on the side of it was intentional, but.
Where's the accident?
Go ahead, Doug.
I'm confused. What was the accident?
The Ouija board.
The Ouija board, whether it not, I mean, was there an intent behind it? Was there a plan to actually bring this out with the Secret Doctrine and so on? And again, I'm not implying that anything's accidental or anything's planned. I'm just saying, here's what happened. Here are the dates.
Well, you know, when something as far-reaching as the Secret Doctrine comes out, or even the Book of the Dead, you're going to introduce something where it's almost going to discredit certain things.
Mm-hmm.
So Ouija board meaning, okay, yeah, anybody can contact the spirits or whatever, because she, you know, she's got these Mahatmas there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who are going to say, well, who are they? And okay, well, with my Ouija board, I'm able to talk to Aunt something, or yeah, I don't know. I'm just.
And again, this comes from this spiritualist movement, right? Where
yeah,
before we needed mediums. This is kind of like within the church where at one time, you know, we needed priests, right? And then the new movement came and said, you don't need priests, we can go direct to God, right? This is kind of saying we don't need mediums anymore. We can go direct to these, and we have the tools, which is the Ouija board, right? We can
At the
actually
same
talk to
time,
go ahead.
oh, sorry, Will.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, I just want one thing about that introduction of it is it was released as a toy, and there's a certain amount of ridicule associated with it. I think a lot of people very easily could put their hands on it and figure out that their friend was doing it, or you know, or do it themselves, you know, like push it somewhere themselves and assume that somebody else is doing it. So yeah, it's an aspect to it.
But again, like I said, the patent states, okay, and it said it was proven that this does work for these, you know. And do I think it works? I think it works.
But I don't think they I don't think they put the insert from the patent office into every copy of the game for people to read.
But they actually marketed that way.
Yeah. So is the Ouija board the version of the I Ching?
Well, again, I think
No, because the I Ching, I saw that in the biography of Leonard Cohen, where they use the, you know, the I Ching to, he would use the I Ching to, you know, what is the I Ching saying for today? And, you know, like it could help you decide what to do or something. I'm just, it's different because this is talking about, I guess, talking to the other side, but still.
Well, again, the origin of the Ouija board is Chinese. It does come from China, so it probably could come from the I Ching. And again, I'm not saying that we are talking to spirits here, okay? This could be a mental dowsing exercise.
Okay.
Just like with a pendulum.
Okay.
You know, what they call idiomotor responses, you know, but it is the unconscious mind, but the point I'm trying to make here is that we are beginning to explore new ways of communication with our different subtle bodies that we have never done in the past. And this would have been called witchery, right? You would have been burned at the stake for this in the 1600s, right? So 200 years later, it's a board game. What people were being burned at the stake for. That's the big change in the ideas and concepts of spirituality within the United States and within the entire world, as I said. So we have these things come out that are beginning to change the way that we look at, you know, spirituality and how we approach our religious and philosophical beliefs. So then after the Secret Doctrine is published, Rudolph Steiner, who was the German lead for the Theosophical Society, breaks away from Blavatsky and begins his own thing. He had different reasons for it. One was, you know, he thought that the Secret Doctrine was expressing too much Eastern philosophy, but at the same time, Blavatsky and Ledbetter were pushing Krishnamurti as the new kind of Messiah or Bodhisattva for the age, and Steiner was not in line with that. So he broke away, and he started his own Anthroposophical Society in 1912. So this was started in Germany in 1912. And from that, within the next 2 years, World War I starts in Germany.
Incidents.
There's way too many synchronicities going on.
Again, I don't know. I'm just looking at the dates, right? I'm just doing the historical relevance of this, just to kind of walk through. And
That's cool.
And so, and the funny thing is in World War I, the Germans were very influenced, right, by the ideas of Blavatsky and the Aryan race. A lot of them were found with pendants like this on when they were killed, because Blavatsky within the book and within the doctrine, the Secret Doctrine, talks about the root races and the Aryan race and lots of things that begin to really spark the ideas of a master race. Okay, again, is occult knowledge beneficial to the uninitiated? Big question. A lot of people say that, Blavatsky was told to let this out because things were already moving in a direction. But without secret schools, without initiation, without knowledge of what is being said, and without discernment, this knowledge can run wild in everyone. Okay, so again, World War I was very much influenced. And, the symbol of World War I was the German cross, which is actually the Teutonic cross, which comes from the Teutonic Knights of the Templars. So again, Christian Revolutionary War, Christian influence, World War I for symbolism. So we are still within a Christian-based society. We have Christians fighting Christians, just as in the Civil War, we had Christians fighting Christians, right? The North and the South, brothers, same families. Again, now we have the whole world, right? The Germans fighting mostly Europeans and Americans who are also Christians, but their symbolism is still Christian, the Teutonic cross. So the Germany's supposedly defeated. They go into the into big recession, lots of problems in Germany after World War I. But in 1924, 6 years after World War I, we actually have the discovery of King Tut's tomb. And again, during this period, we have new esoteric knowledge coming out, because now the Rosetta Stone, we've had the deciphering of the Book of the Dead. Now this Rosetta Stone is able to decipher the writings on the walls of the tombs also. And we have all this imagery that was never brought forth before to the Western civilization of King Tut's treasures and items and imagery is being brought to the Royal British Museum and put on display.
Yeah, like stolen, no?
Yes, like stolen. And there's a big revival in Egyptology and Egypt stuff within the United States, with jewelry and all kinds of things. And the symbology of Egypt comes to a head in the United States after the discovery of King Tut's tomb. So with World War I, we are still within a Christian mindset, within the symbolic ideas of Christianity, of Western. Again, I'm not saying that the Germans were Christian or this was a depiction of Christianity. I'm just saying the symbolism is Christian, okay? It's based on a Christian symbol still. Not saying that it was a Christian movement, okay? I want to get very clear on that. But I'm just talking about the symbology that's being used. So then, after the discovery of King Tut's tomb, and that Germany is in a kind of a recession, and we have Adolf Hitler's in prison where he meets a fellow who talks about the Secret Doctrine and the Tool Society, which came out of some of the Theosophical Society, which was really based on the Aryan race, which had taken the Secret Doctrine and kind of perverted it into a very much just a eugenics book about the race and so the idea that there was an Aryan race and that this was a German ideal and that it was almost based back to the Teutonic Knights of the Templars, and it was very much about this Aryan idea of the supreme race. And so as you remember, Hitler gave his speech in 1938 from the Loki film that we watched. If everybody remembers that, that was in 1938. Well, in 1938, the Nazis, they go to Tibet to do the same thing that Blavatsky did, to go into the monasteries, to find this esoteric knowledge, to find this hidden knowledge, to actually begin to use occult practices to further their cause, to further the occult practices. And there's books that are put out on this called the Occult Nazis and so on and so forth. So as the Nazis are going, here in the 1938, just prior to this, so after World War I, the United States goes through this trial called the Scopes Monkey Trial. And I don't know if people who are not familiar with the United States know what the Scopes Monkey Trial is, or even those in the United States don't know what the Scopes Monkey Trial is.
Yeah, I know.
But this is where the idea of back to the Darwin of 1859, so this is basically 65 years from the publishing of Darwin's Origin of the Species. There was a Tennessee teacher who taught evolution per Darwin, and that was outlawed in Tennessee, that you could not teach evolution from monkeys or Darwinism.
SWAT, huh?
And so they had this trial that was really kind of a show trial. It was between Clarence Darrow
Oh, yes, that one.
and Eric Jennings Bryant, where they discussed the Bible and creation and God and so on. And it was really kind of a farce. It was really a show trial. But again, this is another hack at the root of Christianity, the Bible, and the origin story of creation. So we've had these, little chops at the root this whole time, but this is kind of a big chop because this is really going after Christian fundamentalism of the Bible being, the Word of God, the inherent Word of God, literal interpretation, so on and so forth. So the same, just before the Nazis go into Tibet, we have this big questioning. And again, this happens a year after the discovery of Tut's tomb, right? So we're already having questions. There's maybe a different way to look at the world with Egypt and things that are going on there. And then we have the Scopes. Nazis in Tibet, they're checking out the occult. They're going to these Tibetan monasteries. They're going through all these esoteric records. It's said that some of the people up in Tibet were kind of cool with the Nazi symbol, the swastika, because they were familiar with it. And in their mind, the swastika was a symbol of peace and harmony. I don't know if they noticed that it was backwards, but they're looking, because when you watch the videos of the Nazis in Tibet, they're wearing Nazi helmets with these big swastikas on them. So it's kind of amazing. But anyway, so the Nazis go there, they actually get a lot of occult knowledge. And when they return, what happened? World War II starts. Okay,
Is that when they flipped the thing around, or it was always backwards?
No, again, they're showing. I think this actually started in 1938 when Hitler came out, because when Hitler came out in 1938, they already had this symbology. And when you look at the helmets that are on them in Tibet, it is this flipped swastika. So again, so now we see that the Nazis go to Tibet. Again, kind of the same idea of what Blavatsky did with the Secret Doctrine. Again, is occult knowledge, should it be made popular? Should it be made public? Or again, is this all part of our evolution as a species, right? I'm not talking about Darwinian evolution. I'm talking about the first natural law that we talked about, which is the evolution of mankind. Is this what is going on? So I'm going to stop here for a second. And any thoughts to date of what we've discussed or what we've been talking about? Okay, I'll ask this question. How many people think that the Nazis lost World War II?
Well, I was introduced to that idea. Are you guys familiar with Robert Sepper?
Yes.
Yeah, the world's most dangerous anthropologist.
Mhm.
He calls himself. That's a great name. But yeah, he's talked a lot about this kind of stuff, and yeah, he gets into some pretty wild concepts that propose that they actually, I essentially that they won and faked their own loss, and we're living in some sort of a maybe it's not quite the man in the high tower concept, if you know the Philip K. Dick story, but and that they went into the ground. Yeah, it's, you could probably expand on it some more.
Philip Dick, though, he knew everything already. So there's no reason he shouldn't know this. He predicted not predicted the illusion that we live in illusion. He said this in 1920 or something, 1930, no?
Any comments, Grant?
I loved it.
No, I was pretty much gonna wrap the same wrap Jeremy did, but yeah, I think the American populace has been pretty ignorant to that fact, and it's pretty obvious if you just like look at the dates and the facts and stuff.
What's actually kind of amazing too is how many of the pharmaceutical companies that came out of the World War II, out of the concentrate Bayer and different ones that actually developed the chemotherapy drugs and so on, are now in power today, and that a lot of our medical system, pharmacology, is from World War II and from Germany's concentration camps. Yeah. And when you look at the Nuremberg trials, which no one watches, and they're actually beginning to be deleted from YouTube and different areas, how much of that technology came out. And Germany was a small country. It had no oil. It really could not become a world power based on resources. It would have to have a very large empire of different countries to actually become a world power. They had no warm water port. I mean, that they only had a northern port. So they actually needed an area that was much more beneficial in which to grow their empire if they were going to do it. Operation Paperclip, where we took on a lot of the German scientists to develop, our nuclear program and other things, our rocket technologies. It was almost like it was a relocation campaign.
Yeah.
More than a loss for the Nazis. I'm not talking the German people. There's a difference between the two. Okay. Yeah. You have the German people who actually lost the war, right? They suffered hardship. The Nazis, kind of took their money and they went to South America. They went other places and went to the United States, because what is developed next is the atomic bomb, right? Which is done with many Nazi scientists.
And also the bombing, like Dresden and Berlin, the war was over when they bombed. They were just killing the evidence. The old cathedral style free energy buildings.
And so, and some people even say that the atomic bomb wasn't needed.
It was over. The war was over when they dropped the atomic bomb.
And and the testing with the atomic bomb out in New Mexico was actually said maybe to open a portal or close a portal for some energy that may have been happening. So again, I don't know these. I don't know for sure, and who can say? But it's amazing that from that technology, we actually bombed the United States, right? We bombed the desert for whatever reason, right? I guess we had to test it because we didn't want to go over there and drop a dud for sure. We want to bomb ourselves. And at that same time, the Nag Hammadi scrolls were actually uncovered in 1945, which are the Gnostic scrolls that are in the Nag Hammadi library.
Didn't they do that Philadelphia experiment during the same time also?
Yes, and that was a relativity experiment of space, of time travel. So
I just heard that library was funded by the Rockefellers.
It could
Rockefeller
have been.
Institute.
Well, again, I know that Jung had some scrolls, had at least one scroll from the Nag Hammadi that he got caught with and had to return, that he had purchased on the black market. So again, this was Gnostic information that was found it's just strange that it was found in 1945, because in 1947 we actually have the Dead Sea Scrolls found.
Will, one question, I might have this wrong, but I mentioned the Book of Thomas last week. Was that part of the Nag Hammadi?
That's part of the Nag Hammadi.
Yeah, I thought so.
I think there might be some. I don't know if they're in the Dead Sea Scrolls or not, because again, the Dead Sea Scrolls were just published in 2015, the English version of them.
Here's this thing.
Yep.
That's cool.
So
what about the Gospel of Thomas? I missed that conversation.
That it came from the Nag Hammadi line, within the Gnostic scriptures.
I brought it up last week. We were talking about the kind of it has a different conception of where God lies, or at least that was my reading. But you know more about it, Will. Anyway, I thought you could watch the replay.
And again, it just seems strange that right after all the atomic bomb in World War II, we find these new scriptures, right? It's this new doctrines that have never been, and the Catholic Church took over, this for a while. And like I said, they've been piecemealing them out, but I think it's 2015 is when the entire Dead Sea Scrolls that they have were translated into English. Now, in 1947, I don't know if anybody knows what the Operation High Jump is, which is
Admiral Byrd.
Yeah,
visiting the South Pole, isn't it?
Yes, and Antarctica. And again, this gets kind of back to that question, did the Nazis lose World War II? And some people think that they actually, just went and relocated after the atomic bomb was dropped, that it actually opened up portals in the world. And one of them was in Antarctica. And and Admiral Byrd went down there because there was rumors that there's something going on down there. He went down there with a huge fleet and was defeated and returned back to the United States, where he was
defeated, huh? There was a war down there?
Well, again, a fleet went down, and then he reported that they were turned away by an overwhelming force of superior technology. Those stories were sequestered.
Those are sources, right?
Yeah, and well, again, I'm just saying kind of what is out there, right? It is a true thing that Admiral Byrd went down there and reported back that he was repelled, but all those stories were kind of squelched, and he was kind of put on ice after that to talk about what really went on. So we really don't know.
But he also said he found that other area that had, all this, coal and iron and warm weather and blah, blah, blah.
Again, a better place than Germany.
Talk about the story that we're living in a crater, a little tiny piece. It's a big pizza pie, and we're living in a little thing, and Antarctica's the way out.
Yeah, and then we have the World Trade Center in 2001. Again, it's another major thing in which we begin to have a new enemy, the unseen enemy of terrorism.
We left out Oklahoma.
Well, Oklahoma really wasn't a major thing that affected the whole world. That affected.
Well, what about the Cold War? That's also a big question. I've heard that was potentially like one in a line of these kind of threats.
Well, it's the unseen threat, right?
Yeah.
Now,
the Cold War.
One of the big things I left out was between the American Civil War and World War I, why we weren't involved, while 1861 to 1914, why the U.S. wasn't involved in any wars, was because we were fighting the Indians at this time. Also,
really?
These were all the Indian wars, where we were fighting the Sioux and the Comanche and the Apache and
killing.
Yeah. Yes, a whole nation of people. But we weren't involved in any wars outside of ourselves during this time. A couple, War of 1812 and so on, which was really kind of an Indian War and so on. But we had the Spanish-American War, I think, too. But not much really going on here. Then we have the World Trade Center, and now we have the pandemic, another unseen foe that we all have to be afraid of. So this just kind of goes through the spiritualist movement, how it started, where it really ended up was really World War II, because that was really a culmination. And again, I'm not saying Blavatsky had anything to do, believed in Nazism, believed in any of that. That's not what I'm saying. I don't believe that. I don't believe that she nor Steiner believed in that, because Steiner was run out of Germany when they burnt down the Goetheanum by the Nazis and had to go to Switzerland. So I'm not saying that I believe that, but I'm just saying that this symbol comes from this. Okay, it's an old symbol, but the ideas that started with the Secret Doctrine have come down and have permeated the culture of the world. And again, I'm not saying that the Secret Doctrine was the cause of it. What I'm saying is that the knowledge that was presented in the Secret Doctrine was occult and deemed so powerful that the Nazis wanted to actually go and find that knowledge and make it manifest and use that. And like I said, if the Nazis didn't lose World War II and actually just came and kind of, morphed into some of the U.S. government and U.S. military, where is that occult knowledge today, and is it being used against us?
Sure feels like it.
So again, that's what I'm trying to make here. Not that not that I'm saying that the Anthroposophical Society or the Theosophical Society had any ill intent, but the knowledge that they presented, the occult knowledge that they presented, may have been picked up by the Nazis, used for World War II, used in some of the things that they're doing today, and is still present in the United States today. So with that being said, we're at 5:45. We still got 15 minutes. So let's get quickly just to this one when we'll finish up. I didn't realize that was going to take that long to go through that. Hopefully that was helpful for everybody to kind of get an idea and a timeline to understand kind of where. So the question that we have, and I better cover it because it's the title of our thing, is who are the rulers of the race? So we understand where Blavatsky is writing the Secret Doctrines. This is out of Manly P. Hall's question and answers. This is what he says that the Secret Doctrine says. So who are the rulers of the race? So what the Secret Doctrine says is every race has two rulers, and each of the sub-races also has its executive. So within the cosmology of Blavatsky and Steiner, there are 7 root races, and there are 2 rulers. One of these rulers is the lawmaker, who functions to the mental and intellectual pole, which we could actually call the male pole or the father pole, or the yin, right? And is called the Manu, or lawmaker. So again, this gets back to the natural laws, right? That law is the number 1, right? The Manu is the law. So this corresponds back with the natural laws we discussed last week. The other function, the other functions to the heart sentiments and is the great mystic. So this gets back to, again, that the law is number 1, but it is adorned by intellect and the heart. And that is this second one. He is called the Bodhisattva. He works in love, while his companion directs through force. These 2 are referred to as the great brothers. So within Blavatsky's cosmology, expressed in the Secret Doctrine, which was taught to her by the Mahatmas from millennia all the way back to Lemuria, this is what she says is how our world runs, how our existence here on earth runs, is that there are two rulers. One is the Manu, the other is the Bodhisattva. And it could almost be looked at as the king and the priest. The law and science, and the heart and the spiritual. And I do a little discussion on this in one of my videos called the king-priest archetype, which is also the archetype of Melchizedek in the Bible. So the Manu,
Melchizedek?
Melchizedek.
Melchizedek.
Within that, the idea, so, you know, Christ was considered a bodhisattva. I don't really know. I mean, we do have a name for the ruler of the, so what are the manas, right? So there are the 14 great intelligences who have charge of the 7 root races of men. These are the 7 seed manas and 7 root manas. It is stated that when a race is to be born, one of the manas takes a physical body, comes into the world, and plants his seed in the race. It is afterward becomes his race. He directs it according to his intelligence, that it may unfold sequentially its latent possibilities. The Manu of our race is called Vaivastavata. The Manu differentiates race type, building the bodies of his charges into the likeness of his own type. So within Blavatsky's teaching, within the Secret Doctrine, here are the 7 root races. So the first was the polar race, then the Hyperborean race, then the Lemurian race, which is water. So we have fire was the first one. So these are like our fire bodies that I think Doug was kind of mentioning some of this in
Yeah, when they first came into polar is what he said also.
Yeah, and then we have the Hyperborean race, which was air. And then we have the Lemurian race, which was water. So the Lemurian race is really where we get some of the Venusians, the idea of some of the Venusians, which are some of the blue-skinned type of gods that we see in Hinduism and so on. And then we have the Atlantean race, which is earth. And then we have the Aryan race, which is ether. So this Aryan race is really what Hitler picked up on. And when you hear about the Aryan race and so on, this is what was really ran with by Hitler and taken out of context from what Blavatsky was saying. But again, it was this occult knowledge that he was using to inspire the German people. And there are going to be 2 future races. So with that being said, when you see these blue gods, they actually are called like a fish god because they are of water. It said that they can actually breathe underwater. And this is where you get some of those stories of Atlantis also, because these guys were left over into the Atlantean, where it was an underwater thing where they could breathe underwater and so on. But this is actually what this Vaivastavata is supposed to look like. Kind of a fish god. This is the way it's portrayed with the blue skin. So
the tail hanging around the back though.
So, and the blue skin was supposedly because they might have been from Venus and so on, and that they weren't used to our sun, and it was a different thing.
Look, because they had no oxygen on the water.
It could be they were turning blue. But this is what the Secret Doctrine says back to who are the rulers of the race. So we have some time left, and I think we're going to stop here for now, but we're going to take questions. Anybody have any comments on what we've talked about today? Or about the Manus or the Manu, or how you feel about that? What you think about it?
What is all this stuff from this one race to the other, though? There was a whole story going from polar to Hyperborean.
Yes, there's actually, and we're going to get into that a little bit next, and maybe I will get into that just a little bit.
I never heard of that before in my life.
Well, see, when you look at Steiner here, Steiner's actually explains a little bit better than Blavatsky, I think, because he's a little bit from more scientific. So what he's saying is that, you know, we have these, and this is where, I want to, I'm trying to relate this back to Russell and what Russell's saying also, because Russell talks about Venus, that's our next incarnation. And so the fourth chakra, or heart, is ruled by the planet Venus. Okay, the heart chakra is much more powerful than many realize. In Chinese medicine, it is seen as the home of the Shin, or spirit, which each of us, it is called the emperor of, or sovereign ruler in the classic. So again, this is the name sovereign, and we're getting back to this idea of the heart being the sovereign ruler. So as we talk about sovereign spirituality, right? It's our heart. It's our heart that makes us a sovereign being. Per the idea of Venus and where we stand within Steiner's cosmology. So what Steiner said is that the bodies in the human race has gone through different incarnations, right? As we evolve, as we reincarnate, that we must pass through certain planets or different incarnations. And each one of those corresponds to a planet. So it started off with Saturn. We had a Saturn incarnation, which actually, was like the physical body. We have a sun incarnation, which corresponds with the etheric body. We have a moon incarnation that starts with the astral body. We have an earth incarnation, which is the I, which is the I am, which is I and personality. We have the Mercury incarnation, which is the spirit self. We have the Jupiter, which is the life spirit. And we have the Venus, which is the spirit man.
You skipped Mars.
Mars is not in Steiner's cosmology of planets.
All right, got it. It's written
Wait, here's Mars, sorry. There is Mars here, sorry about that. So Mars, so we have the 1, 2, 3, 4, but we only have ABC, right? Then we have ABC here. So we have these incarnations of these planets that correspond with these different bodies. So when we look at the soul elements, we see the physical, right, and the etheric, and the astral, and the I. And within what they call the Vesica Pisces here, we have the thinking, we have the feeling, and we have the willing. So these are all supposedly different incarnations that humans have gone through, which is what we would go back to the number one rule of the natural laws, which is evolution. So we have evolved through these different planets, with our next one, as Russell says, through Venus.
But not as apes. We weren't. You don't mean evolution like Darwin, right?
No. Again, that's really, I believe, one of those things that have been put in place, that when you say evolution,
Yep.
that people take, and that is not what Steiner means or the occult means. The occult is saying that we've always been humans, which have a soul and a spirit. Animals have a soul, but Steiner says they have what they call a group soul. So they have a canine soul, like for dogs, a bovine soul for cows, and so on. But humans have the I. A dog really doesn't know I, it knows pack, right? It knows that kind of thing. It doesn't really see itself as I. It sees it as part of you. I mean, we as humans really are the only ones who have I and question, why are we here? Your dog's not questioning why he's here. Only humans do that. And so within that, we have these ideas of this incarnation of these different time periods on the earth, which actually corresponds back to these root races also. And these were different incarnations of us during these times. And so as we evolve, this time we're in right now is just a time of ascension to our next, maybe future race.
They talk about the future race where we're both man and woman together as one.
Well, we are the hermaphrodite being, which is almost like an angelic being. When you see them, they're really sexless. They look like very effeminate.
He doesn't mean hermaphrodite. He meant that what's his name? Manly Hall was talking about it. But eventually we'll be, two-headed, you could say, but it's going to merge into one.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what we'd call hermaphrodite.
Vertebrae and all that.
That
crap.
we have both female and male consciousness. And that is really where we're kind of going with the heart and with Venus, because our previous incarnation, which was Mars, right, which was with the warlike, the Greek ideals of war and so on, which was which was more of a Mars spirit, warring, and we still have this war mentality we talk about, where we have to be at war constantly with either the government or this or that. I mean, the whole idea of when we went through the timeline of wars, right? Wars. Now we're World Trade Center, we're at war with we're at war with the war on drugs, war on everything is a war mentality, right? Which is still a holdover from Mars. But the new era that we're moving into is going to be, as Russell also states, is into Venus, which is more of a heart-based system. And as humans begin to embrace the heart, but we're not embracing the heart, we're embracing the mind. And we're leaving the heart behind.
Materialism.
And those that are embracing the mind more than the heart will end up with what Steiner calls the eighth sphere and technology and so on. And I'm not to say that technology is bad, but if we're doing technology from a heart-centered space of just a mind and material system based, then it will be a dysfunctional technology for the Earth and will not allow us to ascend to our next planetary evolution in an organic manner. It will be an inorganic technology type, and it will be contrary to our natural organic evolution. Any questions on what we've talked to date before we're at 6 o'clock? Any questions or comments or wrap-ups or?
There's a lot in there.
Yeah.
Wow.
I can't help but just mention the 7 chakras when you were showing your the different races, and that would be interesting to dig into, but I imagine there is an overlap.
Well, there's
a lot of sevens. A lot of everything.
And the 7. I mean, even within this, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right. Here's the colors here.
Senses. We have 7 senses. 2 of them were not being used yet, or some crap.
So there's total overlap, and this is the occult knowledge. This is what is in the Secret Doctrine. This is what is in Steiner. This is what is in all this occult knowledge. And it's just, it's sad that, that the legacy that was really left from the Secret Doctrine was what Nazis picked up on, was just one aspect, which was the Aryan race, right? They didn't, and again, this is when you have occult knowledge without being given out, without having initiations. But was it meant to be? Was it meant to be put out there to put us into the place we are now? And this gets back to, who are the rulers of our race? I don't know if anybody's ever watched the movie Willow, where Billy Barty's the wizard, and he comes to the town, and they're all dwarfs, but he comes to the town and wants to pick a new apprentice wizard. And his question is, he puts up his hand and says, which finger rules the world? And the first guy picks the thumb and he goes, no. The next guy picks this finger and no. Next guy picks this finger. Finally, Willow gets up there and he picks this one. And Billy Barty says, no. And then Willow looks confused before he picks this one. And so Billy Barty later asked him, what finger were you going to choose? He says, my own. He says, that was the correct answer. So who rules the world? Who is the ruler of our race, right? Are we looking to other people to rule us? Are we looking to other people to save us? Are we looking to a savior, a God, a force greater than ourselves to have us not go through the lessons that we need to go through to incarnate to the next level of ascension? Is the ruler of our race our own finger? Or is it some God, some greater power that we are subject to and do not have control of our own destinies? And that's really, I think, the question that I'm posing today, is that who is the ruler of the race? Blavatsky's saying it's the Manus and the Bodhisattvas, which, Jesus was supposedly one. Even, Walter Russell talks that there was less than 40 of these people, but Jesus was the greatest. But was Jesus really a ruler, right? He says, I am not of this earth. I mean, the Jews wanted a ruler. They wanted a Messiah that was going to come and have an earthly kingdom, and Jesus was not that man. So what I want to end with today is when being asked, who is the rulers of the race? Are you looking to be saved or have others fight your battle? Or are you willing to have those gods, those bodhisattvas, those entities, those energies, those resonances empower you to be your own ruler and to be sovereign?
Yeah, Jesus was here to show us how to do it ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
The kingdom is within stuff.
So that is my question for everyone today. Any comments on that? Thank you, Brian, for making your comment. All right, well, that ends this discussion for today. Hopefully it was helpful. Hopefully it was enlightening and making us all think a little bit.
Pretty good stuff.
Yeah, this is terrific, Will. I'm really enjoying this.
Lots in there. Yeah.
Well, we're going to finish up a little bit with, next week, we're going to finish up what I had for this time. I spent a little bit too much time on the spiritualist movement, but I think it was good to give us all kind of a common background.
Right.
And what kind of went on and what's going on and why we are where we are today with Secret Doctrine, and how much influence it had and has had on the world, and why it's such an important book. So next week we will finish up with the remaining questions, which I think basically, yeah, we're going to review Walter Russell's concepts of cosmic consciousness. So if you guys want to look at that a little bit in some of the previous videos that we did on cosmic consciousness, what role does Venus play within the human body per Rudolph Steiner? We talked about that a bit. What is the difference between the gods from Venus and the gods from Mars per G.G. Young? Will the gods save us from injustice? We talked a little bit about that. Who are the one-eyed gods, as described in the Secret Doctrine? How may man assist natural law? This is from Manly P. Hall in his questions. And the last one I put in today, after actually watching from Alpha Vedic with the orgone generators, but there was a link on that site that actually went to another fellow who had written some books, and he actually believes that this is an occult spell that we're in, and how can we break that spell? So we're going to talk a little bit about that next week also. So you can watch the Alphabetic tomorrow, and they may actually talk about this a little bit more.
And can you help somebody else break the spell, or is that everybody's own personal path? That's been a question that I've had on my mind a lot as I've struggled with it. I mean,
personally, I think that we're all here for our own development. That's my own, for a long time, I believed that there was going to be a God to come save me, and there was going to be a greater power that was going to save me. And that doesn't, as I develop my cosmology, right, that really doesn't work with that, because we have to face our own demons. We got to face our dark night of the soul in order for us to learn the lessons. I mean, Gigi calls this, the physical gym, right? We come here to work on the issues that we have to allow us to reach the next cycle, to reach the next incarnation. So if we don't learn the lessons here, a God saving us is not going to allow us to learn. That's like, you know, if you don't let your child touch the hot stove and you keep pulling his hand away, even though you know he's going to get burned. I mean, I'm not a parent, so I can't, but if they don't experience that for themselves, they may never learn, right? They're going to keep reaching for it until they actually learn themselves. So is it more loving to keep pulling the hand away? Or maybe say, you know, just get close to it and feel how hot that is. You know, I don't know. But we are going to have to go through these experiences ourselves if we are going to incarnate to the next level, to this cycle.
Definitely.
All right. So I look forward to seeing everybody next week.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
and if you can, kind of think about these questions, and I'll post them for next week. All
Do
right,
you have
guys?
the slides available, Will?
These slides for next week?
Just, I'm not sure where do you make them available? The past
I
slides that you've
I
done?
can. If you'd like them, I can give you a link to them.
It'd be interesting, yeah.
Okay.
I like looking back on it.
Okay. I will give you a link to those slides.
Thanks.
So I'm going to stop the recording here. And then we will stop the sharing. Stop. Gosh darn it.